Hey book girlies, I'm Sarah.
Hey gamer guys, it's Ian.
And you're listening to a pod of sass and sarcasm. Played any games recently? Holy shit, I almost just took myself out.
Yes, I've been playing a game called V Rising.
V for victory?
V for vampire.
Oh my goodness. Is it where you raise an army of vampires?
No, it's where you, well, I guess kind of. It's where you yourself are a vampire. The whole thing takes place in a world where Dracula has been killed and like all the vampires have pretty much been eliminated, and you are now just waking up several hundreds of years later.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're trying to rebuild your status as the big bad. And how that comes about is through a survival open world base building type game.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of PvP elements, but I am not playing with anyone else. There's enough to do on your own without having to worry about another mechanic.
I would say tell me more about this game, but I don't even have like a good question to lead you into it.
Yeah, because this is a game type I haven't talked about on the podcast before. Because it's a top-down game where you're looking at your character from above. I'm trying to think of a good term to describe it.
How is it different than third person?
Well, third person is still considered over the shoulder.
Really?
Yeah.
I would think like...
Yeah, usually
You're like an omniscient... Well, not quite omniscient. You're like free-roaming third person, I would say. Like if you can see them from the... So you're seeing the top of his head. Your character's head.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds third person.
It is still technically third person, but it's not called third person because it's like you control the camera from the top, and it's not linked to where your character is looking. So like I'm looking at the top of their head and my character's looking to the right. Mm-hmm. And I'm not just seeing everything to the right. In a normal third person, like a third person shooter, I'm further down, like over their back.
Yeah.
And I only see the direction that the character is looking.
See, to me, that's still, like, I would almost call that, like, second person. Because, like, in writing, first person is obviously using, like, things like I and me and whatever. And third person is he, she, they, it, whatever. And then second person is the weird stuff that you don't get a lot of, which is the you. Like, you do this and then you do that and whatever. And to me, if I were to describe the different options, there's first person where it's like you are inside the character. You don't ever see the character unless the character walks past a mirror. Then there's, to me, looking above the character and watching what they're doing, but not necessarily like seeing things even like from an adjacent of their perspective. Mm-hmm. I would be like, yeah, that's third person. And then the weird in between would be second person, as far as it's like you're watching them, and so you're like, you do that, but you're still kind of almost getting their perspective.
Yeah.
So I would call that second person, the one thing, and then the thing where you're looking over on top is third person.
I would say that...
But I also was not there making the decisions in the video game community about how to call those things.
Over the shoulder third person, it's more like cinematic. Like it's showing you the character doing something.
Yeah.
Where top down, it's more about what's happening on the map.
Mm-hmm. That's the like only kind of video games that I like, are the ones where you're not actually seeing stuff from people's perspectives. Because like when I think about the video games that I've played, I don't like Mario Kart even, because I don't like being behind I would rather see it from the top.
Interesting.
I would rather see the track that way. And I understand that they give you a little map sometimes. It's in the bottom left corner and I never look at it.
That's very interesting.
I don't think... The only thing is that like sometimes that makes it hard to understand which way to like turn your controller. Like if it was in Mario Kart kind of thing, like I wouldn't want... I don't know if I would always be able to tell like, oh, I should go right to make it go that way or whatever. But like, I feel like I could with a map. But like I like the regular Super Mario games, like specifically from the Game Boy era. I loved Game Boy, and that's from the side. So that's, you know, you see
that's
like,
called a side scroller.
Yeah, I like side scrollers.
Mm-hmm.
And then any other game that I've played that I've like genuinely enjoyed, it's just been looking down at them from the top.
Okay. I mean, that makes a bit of sense because it doesn't you don't have to train yourself to think about which way you want to look within the virtual space.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to translate that into like an arm or a hand movement. It's just more straightforward. That makes sense. The other big aspect this hits is I've talked about a couple times on this show is it's like a crafting game. It's a crafting and base building game. So
you got me really excited for a hot second. I was like, oh my God, do you knit? And do you do like arts and crafts? Do you do some crochet?
I do make thread.
Oh, you're a weaver. You have one of those little spinning things, right?
Mm-hmm.
No.
It's kind of like that, but it's like this giant thing. It makes rugs, it makes cloth, it makes yarn, and it makes thread. That's one of the refining. Essentially you have a refining and a production. So you're refining materials to make something.
Wait, so why do vampires need to make rugs?
It's so I can make my castle look sick as fuck.
Oh my God. You, first of all, are gonna love what we've got going on in the book this week. But also...
Yeah.
The things you focus on...
Well, it's also reinforced in the game where certain things require certain rooms to perform better. So all the things associated with tailoring require a tailoring room.
Oh my God.
So if you put all the tailoring stuff in a room and put tailoring floors down, it's 25% cheaper.
I'm mildly obsessed with this game. It sounds awesome.
I have been enjoying it. It's pretty fun. Then you capture people and turn them into thralls, and you send them out on missions, or they become your blood bank.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
Yeah. Because each NPC or being in the game has a percentage of quality of blood. So you're trying to find someone that has really high quality blood, because the higher quality blood you have, the better stats you get from them. And there's like scholars, workers, warriors, brutes, and each one gives you a different stats.
Why is this starting to sound like Mad Max?
I don't know.
Didn't they have blood bags? Like they had like people that they would have that...
Yes they did.
Yeah.
The game's very deep, and I've been playing it for a bit now.
Yeah, is that the one that are you playing it on your computer, or is it on the Steam Deck?
I tried playing it on the Steam Deck. It was a bit difficult to play on the Steam Deck, so it's a bit better to play on the computer.
It sounds fun. Like, I'm actually genuinely intrigued, but I'm not at a really great place in my head to ask questions.
I'm probably not going to play it again for a while.
Why? When you spent an entire season on motherfucking Warframe, but now you start playing a game that I'm actually curious about, and you're like, eh.
Because Monster Hunter Wilds is coming out tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. Is that a sequel or something to another game? Or is it in a branch of games, I guess?
It's a Monster Hunter game. And we can talk more about it later.
I don't know how stupid you think I am.
It's its own
genre
series.
Okay,
essentially.
That's what I was asking, was just because you said Monster Hunter, and then I heard the colon in your voice, as in the 2 dots, not the other kind of colon. I heard it as Monster Hunter : Wilds, and I was like, as opposed to other Monster Hunter things is what I was getting at, but then you had to be all sassy about it. I mean, I suppose that is the name of the show, though.
All right, I think I've talked about my games enough. Maybe not, it's only been 15 minutes.
Before we get into the book, though, I did want to say, hey, Amelinda Berube. Hey, girl, hey. Mostly because when we got home today, we were looking through the mail, and we're like, what is this letter we've got here? That looks weird. Who do we know in Canada? And then I was like, oh, I was very excited. We got some delightful book merch from Amelinda that I'm definitely going to promote on our Instagram because it's so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're going to be best friends. We really need to figure out how to get like a virtual guest.
Yeah. We need to figure out how that would look, what that would look like even.
But yeah, Amelinda Berube, once we figure out how to attach our recorder to a computer on a Zoom call.
We'd have to set something up.
We're keeping you in mind. We're just really bad at figuring stuff out. But it'll happen eventually. I really hope it does because I think I might actually die though if she's on the show. Because I would just be really excited and I would have to be like pretending to be very professional. I'm not professional ever. Just ask anyone. I would be probably dying of happiness the entire time and probably come across as very strange. Well, stranger than usual. Okay, don't give me that look. And also, thank you for the goodies. We are very excited for the bookmarks and the postcards and just all the stuff. Oh my gosh, we were so excited when we got that in the mail. Or at least I was. I don't know about you, but I was very excited.
Thought it was neat.
All right. Whew. Well, do you want to hear more about this book?
Yeah, let's hear about caterpillar eyes. Oh no. Caterpillar brows.
Caterpillar Brows McGee. All right, so we are reading Dreadful by Caitlin Rozakis, or Rozakis. I don't know how to say her last name. I'm really sorry. I'm struggling with people's names forever and always on this pod. But anyway, so we're reading Dreadful, which is described as a comedic fantasy, and it's seeming to be making fun of, in, a loving way, all of the generic fantasy tropes, which is going to be so much fun. So the book opened up with our main character, Gav, waking up.
I'm sorry. Every time you say his name, I just think of Gravlocks.
Gravlocks? What is that?
Gravlocks.
What is that?
I don't know, but that's what I think
of?
Every time.
You just think of a completely different word?
Yeah. You say whatever his name is, and I think Gravlocks.
And that's not from anything?
No.
Oh, God. Okay.
What's his name again?
Gravrax? He goes by Gav, though. He doesn't like Gavrax.
Yeah, Gav's dumb.
Well, okay. Gav wakes up in his workshop, sans eyebrows, sans memories, and he does figure out quite quickly that he was, or is, a dark wizard in the middle of some sort of plot involving a captive princess and a few other dark wizards like Zarkanar, Velevna, and Zaxis. And he realizes that he can't let anyone know that he's lost his memory since that would make him really vulnerable. And he's like, I'm pretty sure I've got a lot of enemies that would take advantage if they knew. He also learns that he runs a small, somewhat pathetic castle with goblins as the main staff, and his sneaky, sniveling steward Sirocco, who seems really suspicious. Also, did you like my alliteration that I put in there? I put a lot of effort into that. Anyways, thank you.
Just moves on without me saying anything. Yeah, I did like that.
Thank you. When we last left off, Gav had invited the princess to dinner with him and then had a meeting with Zarkanar where he learned just how in over his head he was. So after his meeting with Zarkanar, which also I'm going to really struggle to continue to say his name, but anyways. After his meeting, Gav was feeling kind of deflated, but he still made it to dinner with the princess, who surprised him first and foremost by showing up. He didn't think she was going to come.
She was hungry.
Of course, during the dinner, she threw her steak knife at him and then had to have her steak cut into little biteable pieces for her. And then the two of them chatted a little bit. She was obviously very cautious and still extremely confused by Gav because she clearly doesn't trust him. Obviously, he kidnapped her. She thinks that he's putting on this like polite front. And this really suggests that he had been exceptionally cruel to her when he had initially kidnapped her and during those previous interactions. And so now she's like, you think I'm just going to forget about all the crazy shit you did to me? And he's like, what did I do? And she's like, I don't want to talk about it. And he's like, I can't figure out who I am if I don't know this stuff. God damn it. Anyway, so I wanted to read you this little passage because it was great. When she appeared at the doorway, he nearly knocked over his chair. Grrr Beetle grabbed it before it could hit the floor, replacing it silently. He'd have said something, but his words had deserted him. He'd feared Sirocco's dress would be red and plunging, Instead, the princess floated in a blue cloud. The bottom could have been disintegrating, and he would never have noticed. Instead, his eyes were drawn to the graceful scoop of the neckline, hinting without revealing, and the gold belt that hugged the gentle flare of her hips. Sirocco had surprisingly good taste, it seemed. Her hair hung in a simple braid over her shoulder. He forced himself to take a breath. She held her head up proudly, once again meeting his eyes. One of the goblin guards accompanying her gave her a little nudge in the small of her back. She took an unwilling step forward. Gav came back to his senses and forced himself to keep a measured pace as he walked the length of the not actually that long hall. Did he know any courtly graces at all? He didn't really think so. Should he offer her his arm? He had enough time to imagine her looking at it with disdain before he reached her side. He opted to pull back her chair instead. "Do sit," he said, trying for a gently mocking tone. She would never accept sincerity, and he didn't want to order. She sat stiffly, her gaze roaming the room. He saw her lip curl slightly as she glanced at the banners, and tried to hide his own wince. He tried not to take it personally. "Not a suitable setting," he said, trying to cover his wounded pride with snideness. "But we are not often graced with visitors of your loveliness." She was too ladylike to sniff, but he suspected she wanted to. Why had he said that? It was true, of course, but he'd said it in the nastiest way possible, reflexively. Was that how he always treated pretty girls? He wondered which had come first, the conviction that women would treat him with disdain, or his apparent determination to treat them like they would, before they could get that far. He made his way to the head of the table opposite her, trying to feign a nonchalance he did not feel. A goblin poked its head in, and he gave it a wave. The wave came out much better this time. He had practiced. More goblins trooped in, silver dishes clutched in their claws. They kept their heads high, nearly tall enough to see over the table, as they deposited a lidded dish in front of him. The goblin at his elbow whipped the lid off, staring anxiously at his face to catch his reaction. He had been unsure of what to expect from the state of the kitchen. Some kind of gruel, perhaps? A whole small animal that would need to be deboned? Instead, he merely found a rather excellent-looking steak, if a bit on the rare side. He gave the creature a tiny nod of approval, and it nearly collapsed with relief. Another goblin filled his goblet with a heavy red wine before the lot of them scampered back the way they'd come. Gav's mouth filled with saliva, and he tried not to saw the meat too eagerly. His stomach nearly cramped with hunger. It took effort not to allow his eyes to roll back with pleasure as the hot juices hit his tongue. He'd eaten 2 or 3 bites with indecorous haste before he looked up to see how his guest fared. The princess sat with great dignity, her hands folded in her lap, her plate untouched. "Is your meal not to your liking, your highness?" "I'm not entirely sure how you expect me to eat this," she said coldly. For a moment, he teetered between scorning her for her daintiness and apologizing for providing such an unsuitable dish. Then he looked at the table in front of her and realized the problem. He sighed and gestured for Grrr Beetle. "Please fetch the lady a knife." Grrr Beetle, apparently a sensible sort, looked surprised but headed for the door. A moment later, the goblin reappeared with a proper cutting knife. The princess raised an eyebrow. "You trust me with this?" He raised an eyebrow of his own. "You're at the other side of the table. I doubt you'll get very far without me noticing. What are you planning to do? Throw it at me?"
Said the man before he was hit with a thrown knife.
She blew a little breath out her nose, but opted to cut herself a bite of meat. As she ate, she eyed him speculatively. He took the opportunity to stuff another 2 bites of meat into his mouth, trying to chew suavely to make up for it. Suddenly, her hand whipped back, and then the knife was flying straight at his face. Time slowed down. His hand flipped out of its own accord. A single guttural syllable burned in his throat. The knife struck an invisible barrier mere inches from his face, ricocheting off in a flash of sparks. He tried not to flinch. To be truly dramatic, the knife should have lodged itself in the wall and quivered for a moment for the 2 of them to stare at it. The knife, however, displayed a disappointing lack of sense of drama. It skidded down the stone and landed with a thump. The scorched blade now ended in something of a hook instead of a proper point. Gav looked at it, trying to give his heart time to slow. Then he turned back to the princess when he thought he could speak without squeaking. She had folded her hands demurely back in her lap. He wanted to scream, "What the hell was that?" But he wasn't certain his voice would not shake. Instead, he made do with a raised eyebrow. She shrugged. "Father insisted I be able to defend myself from assassins. You can't blame me for trying." Of the 2 of them, he felt pretty sure she was the more dangerous one. But he certainly wouldn't let her know that. "Would you kindly fetch another knife?" he said slowly to Grrr Beetle, who was trembling by the sideboard, "and cut her highness's steak for her." As the goblin hurried from the room, rather paler than before, he added to her, "If he allows you to take his knife from him, I will punish him this time. Do you understand?" He had been proud of coming up with that threat on the fly, but instead of flinching, she only looked briefly startled. Not horrified, just confused. He suddenly understood. What? He said, the flash of contempt charging through his veins, feeling justified for the first time. Or is the goblin not worth protecting? Too far beneath you? Her sudden flush betrayed her. He'd been right. She hadn't even been thinking of the goblin as a potential hostage. Maybe she wasn't as superior to him as she thought. He felt weirdly protective of the little green people, to his surprise. They were people, weren't they? They certainly had emotions like people. He had the nagging feeling this was perhaps a very strange direction to take, one that wouldn't have occurred to him before. This dinner no longer seemed like such a good idea, but he didn't know how to bring it to a close. Now, he said, with a calmness that he did not feel, you are to be my guest for some time. I had planned to offer you certain privileges now that you've become more accustomed to that idea, but perhaps that must wait. She toyed with her fork. What privileges? Perhaps some writing materials, a book or two to while away the time. With time, perhaps even the occasional walk on the castle walls with me, for air. The first walk on the castle walls with you was quite enough, thank you, she said, looking down to stab at a piece of steak Beetle offered with rather more force than it required. He wondered what exactly had happened on that first walk to make her quite so bitter. He hoped he hadn't held her over the walls or something. But he shrugged, as if it did not matter. Your choice, of course. So I found the scene rather interesting. So not only do we get hints about who he used to be and, you know, him starting to be like, oh, I wonder if I ever would have thought of this if I hadn't lost my memory and, you know, kind of becoming this new person and this new identity. But we also get to see a little bit more into what might drive someone to be evil, which I think is one of the points of the book so far, because they do kind of bring it up a couple times about like what made him be evil and why is he evil and all that kind of stuff. So again, this book aims to put common fantasy tropes on their heads and twist things and make it kind of into a comedic thing, but also just you know, the point of the tropes in general is, you know, to get you thinking about stuff, but then to shift your perspective on those tropes too is kind of an interesting exercise. So generally in the fantasy stories that I've read, when there's a girl being held prisoner, she's usually the one who will be comforted by the staff and she'll recognize their humanity before her captor does. That's at least in most of the ones that I've read, that's what it's like. But now he's the one that's recognizing the humanity of his staff, even though they're not humans, they're goblins. But like,
yeah, I will say that generally the trope is the good guys will just eliminate the bad guys and everything that they stand for. Like the knights kill the goblins and the orcs and all that stuff and the dark wizards. And now he's like, oh, do you not like my goblins?
Yeah. Well, and especially too, because like so far I've kind of cut out some of the descriptions of the goblins, but like they're not trying to make them into like these cutesy things either. Like they're like, oh, these are ugly ass goblins. Like they're like kind of menacing looking. They're short, they're stout, they're, you know, whatever. And so it's not like having this romantic view of like, oh, they're cute and they're wonderful and they're great and it's whatever. And even he, our main character, he's like, he's got some jowls going on. He's got a belt that's getting too tight and shit like that. Like, he's like, God, I'm like this middle-aged man, you know? Like, and he's like, that's kind of disappointing and pathetic and stuff. And so it's like, I kind of love that it's not this cutesy romantic thing that's going on. It's really, like, again, it's turning things on their head. But again, also, he is kind of recognizing the goblins for being, you know, things with emotions, if we're not going to call them humans because they're not, but like recognizing that they are people and all of that kind of stuff, which I think is really great. I'm really curious to learn more about the princess and see if she is as like stuck up as she seems to be, which is great. I'm going to suspect that the dinners become a relatively regular thing between Gav and Elyasha. And during the next dinner, I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, but during the next dinner, Gav uncovers a secret of the princess's. And that secret is that she is also ugly. So we've been talking, like, I like had that description of like how she was super beautiful when she walked in and Gav was like, oh my God, I don't know how to behave around you and stuff like that. But apparently her parents gave her an enchanted ring that she's supposed to wear at all times to make her look beautiful because they were kind of embarrassed by her plainness.
I thought it was like, she's just going to be your tomboy.
Nope. She's ugly.
She's just ugly.
I mean, maybe ugly is too strong of a word, but like she is not this breathtaking thing that he thought she was. She's just kind of like you know, whatever.
Plain not
which
ugly.
is like just unremarkable, which is almost worse, I would say. Like I don't know if I would rather be ugly or not, but like I think I would at least like you'd remember me if I was ugly. Like she looks like she takes the ring off for a second and then he says to her, which he meant this to be mean. He gets this like unnatural or like almost like uncalled for like rage at her sometimes where he's not going to do anything, but he just wants to call her like a bitch sometimes, which I'm like, she kind of is a bitch. So you could say that. But he at one point said something just for the sake of being mean. And that's where he starts thinking like, man, am I really an evil person? Because goddamn, that was uncalled for. One of the things he said to her was though, he was like, you make sure you keep that ring on. He's like, I don't want to see you, ugly ass bitch. You better look hot every time I see you.
Keep that fucking ring on.
It's so bad, but it's so funny. And it did get, I mean, it wounded her the way he wanted it to. She was like, her pride was hurt. And she's like, oh, how could you say that? So to her, this is just him being a cruel, dark wizard. But to him, he's not entirely sure where these urges to be unnecessarily mean are coming from. But for me, it's hilarious. I'm dying. I think
it's coming from his dark powers.
Okay, so after this first dinner, he went to bed and he had terrible nightmares of being bullied. And then he goes off and bullies her the next night, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And when he woke the next morning, he decided that he was going to really start researching, trying to figure out who he is and what the fuck this plan is, that why he's supposed to have.
What is the plan?
The plan. And he at least wants to know what his role in Zarkanar's plan was. Because Zarkanar's like, you've done your part for now. We've got to wait for some other people to get their parts done. And then you will have to do your next part. And he's like, I don't know what my next part is.
What's my next part?
What's my line? But anyways, so he's in his workshop. He's reading his spell books. And he's learned way too many things that he didn't want to know. And not nearly enough of what he did want to know. He'd been reading most of the day, and now he knew many new and horrible things. He knew how to boil an undefended man's blood, specifically in his skull, so that it would cook his brain and release steam from his ears. He knew how to shape that steam into cunning little shapes so as to further terrify onlookers. He knew that in a very faraway swamp, whose location he had detailed directions to, none of which meant anything to him, there lived a certain kind of worm that, when ingested, could cause a person to grow horns from their head that would subsequently emit a poisonous gas that could easily kill a goat. He knew 3 cures for cow burps and had no idea why the writer had not stopped at 1 or 2. He'd also discovered a spell for permanently changing the features of one's face. He could find, unfortunately, no way of telling whether he'd actually cast any given spell. He flipped up the cloth to stare at himself in the mirror. If this was not his original face, maybe that's why it felt so unfamiliar. He drummed his fingers on the edge of the glass. Who else might know him? There were 2 other wizards Zarkanar had mentioned. Zaxis and something. Velevna? He could call one of them, see what information he could tease out, but what if they guessed? What if... He slammed his hand down in annoyance at himself. Enough dithering. He called out the words to make the connection before he lost his nerve. Lightning flashed across the surface, and it started to glow. He had just enough time to assume a sufficiently casual pose in the chair before the other wizard appeared in the mirror. Not a wizard, a sorceress. If the princess had been lovely, the sorceress was the kind of stunning that made men's minds melt. That's a fun alliteration right there. Sorry, I had to... Ooh, that's fun. Shiny, gently waving hair so pale it was almost white tumbled past her shoulders and down out of frame. It was held in place with a silver diadem, the center of which held a brilliant emerald. Thick lashes framed enormous violet eyes that blinked at him languidly. Her perfectly shaped lips were open just a fraction. The matching green robe she wore plunged nearly to her navel, revealing the edges of tantalizing curves. She took a breath through those parted lips, and her chest rose. Gav could not form words. Gavrax, a pleasure, she purred. I was wondering how long it would be before you called. Zarkanar said you'd captured the princess. He desperately tried to get his brain working again, despite all the blood having drained to parts further south. princess, yes. She raised her eyebrows slightly. Good to see you haven't changed. So he was always this much of an idiot with her. Wonderful. He swallowed, trying to get either spit or brain cells to function normally again. And, your part? She leaned back, looking less satisfied. Yes, well, the lords of hell have been somewhat less tractable than your little princess was. He thought of the knife and snorted despite himself. I wouldn't call her tractable. Her eyes narrowed. What, did her tears get your robe all damp? More like her knife nearly got my robe all ventilated, he replied, thoughts coming easier now that she was no longer pouting at him. It occurred to him that a spell to make one's enemies into idiots via the power of breasts might be immensely helpful. Then again, it might not be a spell. It might have only been the breasts. No one told me she'd been given hand-to-hand combat training. Huh, a smile played around her lips. I find myself liking your king more than I expected to. I wish my father had gotten me fighting instructors. A king? Not hers? It occurred to him to wonder where she was. How big was this plot? He tried to stay focused. Needed to keep meeting her eyes and not let his gaze drift lower. Well, you can have him if you'd like. Not that I want your lords of hell in trade. Her laugh surprised him. He would have expected something throaty and sensuous. Instead, he got a sharp crack. It felt more genuine. You poor thing. You wouldn't know what to do with them. Although some of them do seem more inclined toward your gender than mine. I don't suppose you'd be willing to help. Help have anything to do with a demon lord? Some of the lower parts of him voted that whatever help she wanted, he should very much give to her. The rest reminded those parts that if his soul got dragged to hell, he was not going to have a chance to collect on that debt. The evil sorceress who wore seductive robes when she hadn't even expected a call would probably not collect that debt even if he survived. And if she did, he wasn't sure he'd survive that as well. I have every faith in you, he said hastily. I'm sure you have it well in hand. She raised one elegant eyebrow, and he realized the double meaning far too late. Apparently, he still had blood left in his head now deciding to push it into his cheeks instead of his brain. She laughed again. A pity. I would have loved to see you trying to collect demon seed. That's what her part in the plan is apparently jerking off a demon. I don't know. His cheeks ached. There. I'd thought you were getting uncharacteristically coherent. She tapped a fingernail thoughtfully. The long pointed tip had been painted the same emerald as the rest of her robes. My apologies, he said, trying not to sound too strangled. I'll try to remain more witless in the future. I get plenty of witless, she replied, and the ones who keep their wits tend to be dangerously cold bastards like Zarkanar and Zaxxas. So you're saying I'm not dangerous? He didn't feel particularly dangerous, but he did feel a little offended on his former self's behalf. There, dear, you're terribly dangerous. She would have patted him on the head if she could have reached through the mirror, he was sure. His ears burned, but he gave her his best nonchalant shrug. I'm not quite a Zarkanar. Her lips tightened a bit. No one is. Thank the darkness for that. Not a fan? That's hardly relevant. She didn't meet his eyes. It's relevant if we're all partners. He couldn't read the glance she'd shot him. Are we? All of us? He shrugged. There were deep waters here, he could tell, and he didn't think he knew how to swim. I certainly can't speak for Zaxxas. But yourself? He shrugged again. You know Zarkanar. Zarkanar doesn't take me seriously. Her eyes narrowed. He can't see beyond the dress and the hair. And you think he takes me seriously? He at least trusted you to go after the demons. All he trusted me with was gathering a princess, who apparently has teeth. Not that any of us realized that. And it's not like it got her very far. She dismissed the point with a wave. So what exactly are you proposing? He'd propose something? He hadn't meant to propose anything, although now that he thought of it, he couldn't think of a situation in which it would be a bad thing to have allies. And if he had to choose between Velevna and Zarkanar, he was inclined to go with the one with the sense of humor. They both scared him, and he trusted neither, but Velevna seemed like she might be able to be won over in the right circumstances. I'm not certain yet. Biding your time, then? Keeping eyes open, at least. If he doesn't much like or trust us, then why involve us in the first place? Because he didn't have a choice. Because each of us could get him something he needed that he couldn't get himself. Right. Something was off here. He couldn't picture Zarkanar lowering himself to collect demon seed, it was true. But surely he could have retrieved a princess himself. There was a catch he wasn't seeing. So what happens when we give it to him? We weren't going to give it to him until the actual ritual. Unless you were stupid enough to be planning to hand her over ahead of time. No, I'm not that stupid, he said, hoping it was true. I just don't trust him. None of us trust each other. We're dark wizards. Still, she looked unsettled. I'm not offering you the keys to my workshop, he said. But maybe I am offering to share information if something seems odd. I might be willing to consider your offer, she answered. So many hedges. Talking to other dark wizards was exhausting. And in the meantime, what will you do while you wait? He waved his hand. Oh, some research, this and that, and prison warding, of course. Ah, yes, have fun with her. Not too much fun, though. Of course not. She tilted her head, amused. You seem different. The bottom dropped out of his stomach. Different how? You've managed nearly the entire conversation looking at my face, for starters, she said. What excuse could he possibly offer? The princess had some interesting things to say the other day. I've been doing some thinking. The princess? She raised her eyebrows again. Are you playing with your food, dear? He shrugged, his new signature gesture, it seemed. The castle's mostly full of goblins. One becomes weary of meaningless conversation. She's surprisingly intelligent. For a woman? Even he could see the danger signs posted all over that question. For an inbred scion, you'd have expected her to be raised only to be decorative and make a good marriage. Apparently not. Well, don't get too attached to your toy, she reminded him. You don't get to keep her. He nodded. But, she trailed off, thinking. Then she gave him a look so loaded with sultry promise that his mental defenses crumbled before her. If you're really that bored and looking for intelligent conversation, I might be able to oblige. If you're always quite so entertaining. Gah. Ah. Monosyllables. His old friend. The mirror flickered out. For a moment, he just sat there, staring, grateful not to be wearing constricting trousers. He's got a boner. He had a boner that whole time.
Of course he did.
She's hot.
And they told us as much right away.
Yeah. And then at the end, he was like, I'm so glad
He's like, yeah.
that my boner can breathe.
Yeah. I get the feeling that he's not as low level as we think he is, or as I was initially thinking he was.
Oh,
but maybe he was like a pretty low level in this plan.
He was initially thinking that he was higher in the plan, and then he's like, oh, good, at least Zarkanar is the one that's like in the lead, but also that's not very helpful for me. And then as this goes, he actually thinks, like, he keeps thinking that he's lower and lower. So I do wonder if that's...
Yeah. He's low, but he's not super low.
No. Well, and again, he is apparently needed.
Yeah.
Apparently Zarkanar, if he could, would have done this without any of them. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, he couldn't. And now we know that there's a ritual.
I've already kind of pieced what the ritual might be about. They need a virgin princess and demon seed at a ritual site to summon some demon or something.
Yeah. I'm gonna fucking die if Eliasha is not a virgin, though, because that's exactly what I'm expecting. Because now that I know that there's gonna be tropes that are on, like, spun on their head, this is what I think. Yeah. Like, I'm trying to find the way that I'm gonna try to predict what is the trope that they're going for, and then how are they gonna try to fuck with it. That's my fun in this book.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Johnny Bravo scene where he's being sacrificed to a volcano. And they're like, sacrifice this beautiful virgin to you. And he looks at the camera and goes, huh? And then he gets spit back out.
Or I think of in Hocus Pocus when there was like this myth about like if a virgin lights the black candle on Halloween, then the Sanderson sisters come back from the dead and blah, 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 blah. And everyone's like, it's just a myth. And then Max, the main guy, lights the candle and then the Sanderson sisters return. And then after all that kind of stuff happened, he's like, wow, what happened? And then his little sister, who's like 12, is like, a virgin lit the candle. And it's so fucking funny.
I like where this is going. It's very, very fun so far.
So Gavin, Jesus. I see Gav. And
Gravlox.
Gravlox. I see Gav and I'm like, Gavin? Nope, it's Gavrax. So Gav still has many questions, but he's also starting to get a few answers. And one thing that he's starting to realize is that maybe he's not as competent a dark wizard as he had originally thought. And worse, maybe he wasn't as competent as Gavrax thought. You know, his former self. He's like, maybe my former self thought he was all high and mighty, but he's not shit. But now he at least has a potential ally against Zarkanar should he have a need for such an ally. We're not really sure. Probably will, but So another day or so passes. He really digs again back into his research, trying to remember who the hell he is. And he's noticed a pattern about his lost memories. The fact that he mostly remembers how to perform most magics. He will get these flashbacks from his childhood about being bullied or whatever. And at the same time, he can't remember who he is or what the deal with Zarkanar and the princess seems to be. And it's all a bit too convenient, too precise. Like, he's like, I can remember weird details about this. I've got these weird flashbacks from my childhood coming in and stuff like that. I know how to do magic. I know how to do this. I know how to do that. But all of my memories just completely and utterly, like, there's not even a hint coming back about any of this plan. So it just seems a little bit too convenient. And so he believes that his amnesia is not due to him hitting his head or anything like that. He thinks it's because of some kind of spell, or worse, some kind of meddling from an outside source. Then he finds a way to summon a knowledge demon. And he thinks if anyone could give him information about who he is or what his plan is or was, it would definitely be a knowledge demon. There was nothing inside the circle. And then, abruptly, out folded something made mostly of teeth and claws. The hips and elbows jutted at unnatural angles and shifted back and forth restlessly. The mouth was a lipless horror, extending all the way up and back to where the ears should have been. Pointed teeth lined the entire way from one corner of the grin to the other, tightly interlocked like a bear trap. Its eyes roamed the room before locking onto his. They were ancient and all-seeing, containing an eternity of watching all come to naught. For a moment, they stood, measuring each other. "You call again," the demon finally said. He knew immediately that this had been a truly terrible idea. An idea on par, perhaps, with stripping naked, covering himself with honey, and politely requesting a bear to fight him while declaring insults about the bear's mother, who had probably been a perfectly charming lady of the Ursine persuasion. "I seem to be missing some memories," he finally said. "There. A statement." The demon tilted its head to a degree that would have snapped a human's neck. "You wish them back?" it asked. "Perhaps," he said, "depending on the price." It shook its head, as if it had heard of the gesture, but had never actually seen it performed. "I never renegotiate a bargain." "You mean I already made a bargain with you over this?" Had the memory loss been a side effect or the price? For what had he bargained? "That is knowledge, and for that you need to pay." "At what price?" "Knowledge is customary. Blood will do." Knowledge was one thing he did not have to spare. I love that. That's like such a polite way to say, I'm really stupid right now.
I don't know nothing
I don't know anything. I can't give you anything. Knowledge was one thing he did not have to spare. "How much blood are we talking about?" Oh my god, I can't say that line with a straight face because all I think of is in Here There Are Monsters when William was finally bargaining with the woods. Yeah, I was going to say
William.
And he was like, "How much blood are we talking about?" And he was the only one who knew how to make bargains, and it was great. Sorry.
But he also sucked at them anyway.
He also sucked at them, and he lost an eye for it. So, I swear to God, if somebody loses their eye over a bargain in this, I'm going to be like, what the fuck? Coincidence? All right. "How much blood are we talking about?" It shrugged. The shrug rippled down its shoulders, past its elbows, and set the dangling claws clacking. "The more you offer, the more of an answer you receive." This made sense, but it still did not establish an exchange rate. "How about we start with, say, a thimbleful, and then we can raise the stakes from there. We'll see if you like the answer." Gav did not like its smile as it said it. Before he could lose his nerve, he grabbed the small silver dagger that lay on the table, sliced open his left palm, tried not to throw up at the sight of his own blood, squeezed what seemed a reasonable amount into a little dish, and slid the dish across the floor to the foot of the demon. He couldn't help but feel like the demon was laughing at him. It picked up the little glass bowl and opened its mouth. A forked tongue snaked out between the teeth. It scooped the bowl clean, tilting back to let the red run the length of the tongue. Then the tongue disappeared back behind the teeth, leaving not a drop visible. "For that, I will tell you this. I have your memories, including your knowledge that blood crossing a circle would break the barrier." Gav couldn't breathe. To his horror, he discovered that the demon's smile could indeed widen. It shifted its weight and stepped one clawed foot out of the circle. Gav ran. And that's about where I'm at in the book.
I'm really enjoying this.
I am too. I think it's so funny. It's so good. And it's just like such dry humor. It's like it's my flavor of humor. I think this stuff is so funny. There's so many sassy characters. I love it. This is great. This is what I needed.
Yeah.
When I was like, I need something light and fluffy. I was scared because like for a book that's titled Dreadful, I was like, oh, that sounds dreadful. But it's really fluffy so far. I love it. Oh my god, this is so funny. There's some slapstick in it. There's some, some really just witty banter. There's dick jokes happening. I mean, there's something in it for everybody so far. I'm having a great time. It's funny. There's still some good mystery with it. Like, we kind of have an idea of where it's going, but like there's some mystery with it. There's still some surprises, even though like we can kind of guess what tropes they're going for and what ways they're gonna, turn it on its head. But there's still a lot of fun surprises in here. And then there's just funny banter between characters, and there's just some good old comedy in here. I don't know if I've ever read a comedic book, because the only thing that comes close is like Shakespeare's comedies, and let me tell you, those are not funny most of the time. Sometimes they are, but like his comedies are only called the comedies because nobody dies. Like they're everybody lives. That's the only thing that makes those comedies, and I'm like, that's not funny. Because like Taming of the Shrew is a comedy, and I'm like, well, that's a fucking not great one to be funny. Or even, isn't The Tempest considered a comedy because nobody dies?
I don't know. I don't think I've read that one.
I love The Tempest. That's one of my favorites. Anyways, you know what is also one of my favorites? This book right now. It's making my life. It's making everything so fucking funny, and so just puts me in a good mood. Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's so hard reading this book right now, though, because you and I don't have a very consistent recording schedule right now. Mm-hmm. And so I do have to wait like a week with reading and then recording, and I just want to tell it to you right as I'm reading it because it's so fucking funny. I know that there might have been some lines in this one that you're like, yep, I remember you telling me that one, but
yeah, maybe I don't remember.
But I think some of them are funnier within context. I think some of them were funny without context, but well, did we learn anything today?
I was gonna say something about the knowledge demon, but I think it stole all my knowledge.
Good one. I learned that we cannot eat half an hour before recording. We have to eat much longer before that, because my breathing and my burps and everything was just very unpleasant this entire episode, and editing this is going to be a pain in the ass, but that's fine. But I also learned that non-literary people decided to make decisions about what certain perspectives are going to be called in video games, and let me just say they're wrong, because they call something that is arguably second person, they call it third person, and I'm very much against that.
Yeah, I guess that would, since it's more like a film and technically a second person is the cameraman, so I guess that does make sense.
I think my logic makes a lot of sense for calling. I think we should start a petition.
Yeah. I guess now we know third-person shooters is just second person.
Yeah. It's not third-person shooter. Unless you're looking at them from above. Or from the side. I'm good with side-scrollers being called third-person because they are.
Yeah.
But if you are looking at them like over the shoulder, that's second person. In my opinion. Anyways, where can people find us?
People can find us on Facebook.
At A Pot of Sass and Sarcasm.
They can follow us on Instagram.
At A Pot of Sass.
They can send us an email.
At apotofsass@gmail.com.
Can donate to our Patreon.
Patreon.com/apotofsassandcar. I'm going to say that one again. Patreon.com/apotofsassandsarcasm.
And you want to try for round 3?
Jesus Christ. Patreon.
What noise are you making right now?
I can't breathe. That's so funny. Oh my god.
You can donate to our Patreon.
Patreon.com/a pot of sass and sarcasm.
Please rate, review, and share.
And check out episodes on Saturdays wherever you find podcasts. Thank you.
Oh.
Do I need to write that on the board too?
Yeah, probably.
Jesus Christ.
As I forget it. Thanks for listening.
We hope you keep listening. And we hope you stay sassy.
Later.
Just as sassy as the knowledge demon.
No, the princess is way sassy.
Princess is pretty sassy. Let me just flick this knife at you.
She didn't fight, I just tried to kill him. Alright. Ricordo Endo.
Alright, oh.